Welcome back. A Vietnam veteran is finally flying Old Glory again after a 20-year dispute. Richard Olton's Homeowners Association in Windham, Virginia, ordered him to take down his flagpole, claiming that he violated their laws. But now, 2 decades later, with the help of Virginia Delegate John McGuire, he appealed and convinced fellow homeowners to let him fly the flag. He plans to hold a special flag-raising ceremony next month, and that veteran and lawmaker will join us on Fox and Friends in the 8 o'clock hour Eastern Time. So be sure to tune in. Well, the creator of the Jelly Belly jelly bean is going to pot. Apparently, David Klein launching a line of jelly beans infused with CBD. That's a marijuana extract. The 38 flavors include toasted marshmallow, strawberry, cheesecake, cinnamon, and spicy licorice. Klein says that he's convinced his CBD jelly beans will, quote, help the world. What do you think? Well, now it's time for the good, the bad, and the ugly. At first, as always, the good. Taco Bell hot sauce saves a man's life when a car smashes through the Tex-Mex restaurant in Florida. Police say the man was standing right where the car ended just seconds earlier, but he moved to get hot sauce. Police say the driver put the car in the wrong gear. This, by the way, the second time that Taco Bell hot sauce has come to the rescue. Earlier this year, an Oregon man, you remember, survived in his snow-trapped car for 5 days by eating the sauce. Well, now the bad. A police officer dragged by an ATV down a busy road during an illegal bikers protest in Nashville. The officer trying to stop the four-wheeler when the rider just took off, leaving him clinging to the side before eventually falling off. The officer had some minor injuries. Authorities are searching for that suspect. And finally, the ugly. An NBA player hydrates mid-game by sipping on a fan's drink. Look, 76ers forward Mike Scott taking a swig after crashing into the... Well, that wraps up this hour of Fox and Friends First. Thank you so much for joining us. Fox and Friends First continues right now. Bye-bye.
Somehow be the president's fault speaks to a politicization of everything that I think is undermining sort of the institutions that we have in the country today.
All right, it's Monday, March 18th. The Trump administration defending the president against accusations that the New Zealand attack was his fault.
Well, we just learned about the attack that killed 50 people and where investigators have turned their investigation.
And Democrat presidential hopeful Beto O'Rourke some tough questions in Wisconsin.
I'll whisper. Have you ever taken acid? No, I have never taken acid.
Just like the kids in Dallas.
So what are his chances as his party braces for a rocky 2020 primary? And get your daily caffeine fix by subscription?
The major fast food chain that wants you to pay by the month. Fox and Friends First continues right now.
Gets in for Julian Neely.
And votes to try and override
St. Patrick's Day kind of whatever.
Your green's showing a little bit.
Nah, I forgot about that. I'm Rob Schmidt. Thanks for starting your day with us. Overnight, police raiding homes in Australia. This in connection to heinous attacks at 2 mosques in New Zealand.
Yeah, that's right. The international investigation.
President somehow influenced these attacks. Now, we just heard from the police commissioner of New Zealand, who now says they are certain only one suspect here carried out the mass shootings at those 2 mosques in Christchurch. But he did stress he doesn't mean there weren't possibly some other people out there supporting him in some way. Australian police are conducting raids on homes, one of them reportedly belonging to the suspect's sister. Back here at home, though, the White House taking heat as critics slam President Trump's downplaying of the white nationalist threat. Authorities say the New Zealand shooter mentioned the president in his anti-immigrant manifesto.
They say, oh, my goodness, it must somehow be the president's fault speaks to a politicization of everything that I think is undermining sort of the institutions that we have in the country today.
Meanwhile, New Zealand's prime minister announcing gun law reforms will be announced in just about 10 days.
I've already made clear that a number of New Zealanders question the availability of military-style semi-automatic weapons in New Zealand. However, I will be giving a more fulsome set of details once we've worked through the in-principle decision that Cabinet has made.
And listen to this. A Christchurch gun shop owner has admitted that he did sell the suspect 4 guns and ammo legally, but didn't notice any red flags about that man. All right, Carly, Rob.
Thanks, Aisha. Appreciate it. All right, President Trump is praising the Republicans who supported his national emergency order, while lawmakers plan to vote to override the first veto of his presidency.
Yeah, all this as Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen prepares to give a major speech on the state of Homeland Security today. Griff Jenkins is live in Washington with the very latest. Good morning, Griff.
Hey, Rob and Carly, good morning. Secretary Nielsen will lay out her vision for a more secure homeland tonight at George Washington University, expanding on her recent testimony where she made the case that we have a humanitarian and security crisis on the border. This as Congress still trying to undo the president's national emergency declaration. The president tweeting yesterday this: those Republican senators who voted in favor of strong border security and the wall are being uniformly praised as they return to their states. They know there is a national emergency at the southern border, and they had the courage to act. Great job. Meanwhile, a fight is ensuing on Capitol Hill over where the money for a wall will come from. Many concerned about pulling funds from the military and talk of a reported list of projects set to be defunded. Acting Chief of Staff Mick Mulvaney dismissing that notion.
There's no identified list of projects that will not be funded. There's an identified list of projects that will not be touched, but we're still going through the process of prioritizing what projects are on the Pentagon's books for 2020 and beyond.
But Democrat Senator Tim Kaine says if Republicans see the source of funding, it will spell trouble.
This is the White House wanting to hold the list back because they worry that if senators and House members saw the potential projects that were going to be ransacked to pay for the president's wall, they would lose votes.
Mulvaney also says he expects the president's veto will be upheld, guys, when Congress returns at the end of the month and votes to try and override them.
All
Rob,
right.
Carly?
Griff, thank you so much. We appreciate it. Early evidence shows clear similarities between 2 deadly plane crashes involving Boeing 737 MAX 8 jets. Ethiopian officials say black box data from the wreck that killed 157 people last week is reminiscent of the Lion Air October crash that killed 189 people. In both cases, pilots struggled to control the plane and tried to return to the airport, but crashed. Authorities have identified the senior airman shot and killed during a gas station robbery in Arkansas. Police say 23-year-old Sean McCoy Jr. was a customer inside at the time and was shot trying to stop these 2 armed robbers. He died at the scene. McCoy was an active member of the U.S. Air Force. Investigators are offering $10,000 in reward money for information that leads to an arrest.
The suspected killer of a notorious mob boss could be arraigned as early as today. Anthony Comello is accused of gunning down Gambino Mafia boss Frankie Cali outside of his Staten Island home last week. What a story it was. Reports show that this was likely not mob-related, though, but actually stemmed from a fight over Cali's niece. Police are reportedly concerned that Comello now has an X on his back as a mafia target. Investigators say he had no criminal history prior to this. Might have all been for love. A new warning for parents about so-called virtual kidnappings. California police are investigating after scammers called parents claiming that their daughters had been abducted. They demand money to be transferred to a Mexican bank account to get their kids back, and in both cases the ransom was paid before the parents actually found out that their daughters were safe the entire time.
All right, South Bend Mayor Pete Buttigieg says it's only a matter of time before he declares his 2020 White House run.
Because I'm not highly famous and I'm not personally wealthy. It takes a little bit to get the organization in place for a launch. You only get to launch once, but all of the signs pointing in the right direction.
Buttigieg formed a presidential exploratory committee back in January. He is the only candidate still in that exploratory committee stage after New York Senator Kirsten Gillibrand officially announced her candidacy yesterday. If he does declare, he would be the 14th Democrat to enter the 2020 fray.
Getting crowded.
Yeah.
Declared 2020 candidate Beto O'Rourke says he will stop swearing on the campaign trail. This comes after some high-profile slips, or maybe done intentionally, we don't know, like this one during his concession speech to Senator Ted Cruz.
So proud of you guys.
The Democratic hopeful telling supporters in Wisconsin that he'll keep it clean while denying that he's ever taken LSD.
Come on, Beto, clean up your act.
I intend to use the F word going forward. Point taken. And very strongly made.
Cowabunga, dude!
See something?
Yeah. All right, I'll whisper.
Have you ever taken acid? No, I have never taken acid. Just like the kid.
All right. O'Rourke says there is nothing he has not already revealed about his past that could come back to haunt him. All right, the buzz around Beto O'Rourke is giving some Democrats high hopes for 2020, but former Bush White House advisor Karl Rove says while Beto can draw a crowd, he has yet to be tested by an opponent on any of the issues.
He's a charismatic candidate. He speaks well. He can rouse a crowd. He's got a sense of authenticity about himself. It was ironic that his announcement was essentially made by a generous interview in a magazine with vanity in its title. But he is a very attractive candidate, and he raised $80 million in a Senate race and nearly won a red state. On the other hand, his record is thin. His ability to talk about these issues is elusive. And the biggest problem I think he's going to face is that, look, he had 2017 and through September of 2018 where Ted Cruz, his opponent, never engaged him. And now he's going to be engaged every single day.
O'Rourke plans to visit in Michigan, Ohio, and Pennsylvania later this week, all states that President Trump won in 2016.
68 teams, but only one national title. It is time to fill out your March Madness brackets. Can you believe it? Is that time of the year already? Duke, Virginia, North Carolina, and Gonzaga snatched the coveted #1 seeds. Zion Williamson and the Duke Blue Devils are favored to win it all. The first round of games tips off tomorrow.
This is not my moment. I don't know much about college basketball.
I just fill it out and hope for the best.
Yeah. It's usually somebody like me that wins.
I did win once.
You don't want to overthink. Oh, did you?
Yes, I won $200.
There you go. Boom. All right. 10 minutes after the hour, the GOP voting unanimously for transparency on the Mueller report after what a top House Republican is calling a failed stunt. We're going to talk about this. Does this spell bad news for the Democrats?
This right here is the result of a massacre stoked by people like you and the words that you will put out into the world. And I want you to know that, and I want you to feel that deep.
Students blaming Chelsea Clinton for the New Zealand mosque attacks. The unlikely conservative now coming to her defense. We'll have that next.
Welcome back. Top Republicans blasting the Mueller probe transparency vote as a failed attempt by Democrats to divide the party. This comes as officials warn the end of the special counsel investigation may not be near.
Wow. Well, Todd Pyro joins us live with the latest on Capitol Hill. Good morning, Todd.
Happy Monday, guys. The symbolic action passed unanimously, calling for the Attorney General to publicly release the Mueller report. But Congressman Doug Collins says not only is there no collusion, this vote was a stunt simply by Democrats to divide Republicans and make them look like they're hiding something.
They have no agenda. They have nothing that they can actually put on the floor. So they wasted an entire week of the American taxpayers' dollar to actually put a report on the floor that said nothing. Why are we wasting the American people's time?
Democrats say that's not so.
I don't think it was a political stunt at all. What we saw leading up to that vote was the president suggesting that perhaps it didn't need to be released, and concerns with the answers by the Attorney General to be spot on and saying it would be released. And Congress did what it's supposed to do.
So what does the president think? He tweeted, quote, on the recent non-binding vote, 420 to nothing in Congress about releasing the Mueller report, I told leadership to let all Republicans vote for transparency. Makes us all look good and doesn't matter. Play along with the game. And despite weeks of speculation that Mueller is wrapping up, former U.S. Attorney Preet Bharara says not so fast.
I think people should view with some skepticism the notion that gets breathlessly reported every week that the Mueller investigation is coming to an end. I don't know that the work of the special counsel is ending anytime soon.
All this comes after Collins released damning documents on the Clinton email scandal, with more potentially on the way. Carly Rubb?
Is this thing ever going to come out?
At some point.
Hey, next week. I hear next week, Todd.
I know, but everybody's heard next week, and then Barr goes on and says not so fast.
I'm being so sarcastic.
Until it's out, Schmitty.
Yeah,
We don't know.
Okay.
Set your betting lines right now. Let us know what you think.
Thanks.
All right, the U.S. Supreme Court will hear arguments today in a gerrymandering case out of Virginia. Republican leaders in the state want the justices to overturn a lower court ruling that found 11 districts were racially gerrymandered. The GOP has a tight 51-49 majority in the Virginia House of Delegates. The outcome in today's case will impact 370,000 voters.
A Virginia county approves $23 million in incentives for Amazon. Officials backing the deal despite protesters filling their board meeting to discuss the plan. Amazing. The move clears the way for Amazon's new headquarters in suburban Washington, D.C. The state has already committed to $750 million in incentives. Amazon pulled out of its deal to build another facility in New York after widespread criticism. People didn't want to see the tax incentives.
Yeah, that's right. All right, the time now is 17 minutes after the hour. Have you seen this? Students ambushing Chelsea Clinton, blaming her for the New Zealand mosque attacks.
This right here is the result of a massacre stoked by people like you and the words that you will put out into the world. And I want you to know that, and I want you to feel that deep.
Well, the unlikely conservative now coming to her defense.
And Congresswoman Ilhan Omar called Israel evil. But now she says she's got a solution for peace in the Middle East. Stay tuned.
Of the critical Offutt Air Force Base, damaging 60 buildings.
Janice Dean here in the studio, tracking the latest on the aftermath of a lot of powerful storms lately.
Wow. Unbelievable. Yeah, and this is going to continue for the next couple of weeks as the rivers continue to rise and they crest, and then they're going to move downstream across the Ohio and the Mississippi River Valley. So there's the radar. A dry day today, but you can see where we have flash flood warnings in effect for parts of Nebraska and Iowa, Missouri, downstream as well towards St. Louis, as the water has to go somewhere, right? So it feeds into these tributaries across the Mississippi River Valley. So all of these flood warnings in effect as the water moves downstream. This is going to be an ongoing story, not only for the next couple of weeks, but for the next couple of months as we get a lot of snow melt heading into the springtime weather. Future radar, we don't have a big system, but any more water is going to cause problems across these areas that are already flooded. So there's your precipitation across the west, moving across the central U.S. over those flood-weary areas. So that's unfortunately going to be a story we're going to be covering for the next several months. There's your forecast today. Central U.S. looks good right now. We have a system moving out of the Rockies. Northern plains, a little bit of snow there. We have a little bit of rain across the mid-Atlantic and the Northeast. And then, spring arrives on Wednesday. 53 here in New York.
I didn't know that.
Yes.
Wow.
About time, spring.
Yeah.
Spring has sprung. I'll take, what is it, 58?
53.
Okay.
Oh, you're going to be in, 53 in New York and Chicago.
In Chicago.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right.
We love
Janice,
that.
thank you so much.
I'll keep you posted.
Very nice graphic, too.
You got it.
All right.
Yeah, it is. It's pretty. I like that one.
All right. The president pushing General Motors to reopen its closed Ohio plant that left 1,700 people without a job. The president, tweeting over the weekend, just spoke to Mary Barra, CEO of General Motors, about the Lordstown, Ohio plant. I am not happy about that it is closed when everything else in our country is booming. I asked her to sell it or do something quickly. She blamed the United Automobile Workers Union. I don't care. I just want it open. GM responding in a statement, quote, to be clear, the ultimate future of the unallocated plants will be resolved between GM and that union, the UAW.
All right. Former Senator Joe Lieberman doubling down on the values of the Democratic Party.
The Democratic Party is not an anti-Jewish party. But there are some people in the party now, including in Congress, as we've seen from Congresswoman Omar, who are saying explicitly anti-Semitic things.
Lieberman referring to comments made by Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, suggesting her Republican colleagues paid a pro-Israel lobbyist group for support.
Congressman Dan Crenshaw coming to the defense of Chelsea Clinton after she was confronted over the New Zealand attacks.
This right here is the result of a massacre stoked by people like you and the words that you will put out into the world. And I want you to know that, and I want you to feel that deep inside. 49 people died because of the rhetoric that you put out there.
Left-wing activism. Crenshaw responding to that liberal activist who claimed that she was triggered by people who have criticized Congresswoman Ilhan Omar's comments as anti-Semitic. Crenshaw tweeting, quote, "This is the kind of insanity poisoning young minds and led to the terrible accusations against Chelsea Clinton at NYU. Chelsea Clinton is not to blame. Also, if I ever say I am triggered non-sarcastically, please kick me out of Congress." We want to know what you think. Let us know your opinion on this. Facebook, Instagram, anywhere you want to leave it.
That video is hard to watch. You got to feel for Chelsea Clinton there. The time now is 26 minutes after the hour. A possible 2020 primary battle between Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders now sparking memories of 2016.
But could another establishment versus socialist matchup just end up splitting the Democratic Party in two? Political analyst Ron Meyer and Democratic strategist Molly Mitchell here to debate that coming up. Okay, welcome back. Look at our top headlines this morning. Police confirmed there was only one shooter in the heinous attack on 2 New Zealand mosques. A massive international investigation now intensifying as authorities raid 2 homes in Australia overnight. The death toll has now climbed to 50.
Early evidence shows clear similarities between 2 deadly plane crashes involving Boeing 737 MAX 8 jets. Ethiopian officials say black box data from the wreck that killed 157 people is reminiscent of the Lion Air October crash that killed 189 people. In both cases, pilots struggled to control the plane before crashing.
Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen giving a major speech on the state of Homeland Security today. She's expected to expand on the current situation along our southern border, which the Trump administration says is a national emergency.
The nation's top general denying reports that the United States has drastically reversed course from a withdrawal from Syria. General Joseph Dunford, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, saying in a statement, there has been no change to the plan announced in February, and we continue to implement the president's direction to draw down U.S. forces to a residual presence. The Wall Street Journal had reported the U.S. plan to leave up to 1,000 troops inside Syria. Minnesota Congresswoman Ilhan Omar pens a new op-ed supporting a 2-state solution for the Israel-Palestine conflict. The freshman Democrat writing in the Washington Post, quote, "My goal in speaking out at all times has been to encourage both sides to move towards a peaceful 2-state solution. We need to reinsert this call back into the public debate with urgency." Omar has faced backlash from Republicans and Democrats over anti-Israel comments. The U.S. Supreme Court will hear arguments today in a gerrymandering case out of Virginia. Republican leaders in the state want the justice to overturn a lower court ruling that found 11 districts were racially gerrymandering. The GOP has a tight 51-49 majority in the Virginia House of Delegates. The outcome in today's case will impact 370,000 voters. Lawmakers in New Mexico want to replace Columbus Day with Indigenous Peoples Day. The bill passed the state House and Senate and now sits on the governor's desk. Supporters say the change would recognize discrimination against Native Americans and better reflect the state's culture.
Okay, Joe Biden's slip-up hints at a presidential run.
Folks, I know I get criticized. I'm told I get criticized by the New Left. I have the most progressive record of anybody running for the anybody who would run. I didn't mean. But anybody who would run.
All right, there it was. The former vice president still leading in the polls for 2020 contenders, even though he's not officially in. He's followed by Senator Bernie Sanders. So the question, will Democrats ultimately choose the establishment path, the Biden path, or move the socialist way, move further to the left? Here to debate that, political analyst Ron Meyer and Democratic strategist Molly Mitchell. Molly, I want to start with you. Biden says he's got the most progressive voting record. I find that hard to believe. What do you think?
I think that's just a talking point. Yep. And we know that for primaries, people are always pulled on either side, farther to the left or the right. And I think Biden, during his speech, was acknowledging that. But I think Joe Biden has the best problem out of anyone who is running. I mean, he hasn't even announced, just like you said, and he's leading in the polls in Iowa. And the progressive lane is extremely crowded, even with Bernie leading it right now.
Ron, let's look at some information here. Let's pull up Biden versus Bernie as we take a look at this, assuming Biden gets in, which I think is about 95% of surety right now. 27% on Biden. Bernie is moving along quite nicely and closing that gap, though. It was a much wider gap maybe just a month ago. And then let's take a look at Joe Biden's history here. He does have a very bipartisan history, as he calls himself very progressive, but these are some more conservative bills that he has supported in the past. Bankruptcy reform, you see a drug bill there, the RAVE Act, another drug bill at the bottom, crime bill, Defense of Marriage Act back in 1996. I mean, when he calls himself a progressive, do you buy it?
A lot of those, I mean, look at most of those things. President Trump is more progressive than he is, right? Yeah. I mean, that's the irony, is President Trump has a more progressive record as president than Joe Biden does on many of those votes. Look at the crime bill. It wasn't just called the Clinton crime bill. Who was the chief sponsor? Joe Biden. President Trump just did criminal justice reform, which overturned most of the what are seen as racist laws that are implemented in 1994. Look at the Iraq war vote. Joe Biden was one of the chief cheerleaders where President Trump opposed that. And then look at Wall Street. You know, Joe Biden represented Delaware, which has a lot of the banks. He led the bank's effort to crack down on on graduates who had high loan debt. And so a lot of these things are going to be really troublesome when Bernie Sanders starts coming after him and going after his record. You know, I think that gap is going to shrink. I see Bernie Sanders going up in the polls. I see Biden going down. Everybody likes Uncle Joe right now. When Sanders starts going after Joe Biden's record, I think a lot of the progressives are going to leave.
Yeah, Molly, you see in the regular election, after you get through the primaries, who do you think has a better shot, Biden or Bernie versus Trump?
Definitely, I think Biden over Bernie Sanders, but I think we just have to also remember we're still 9 months out from the first primary and over a year away from the convention. So much is going to change between now and then, and the other candidates polled, they don't have as much name recognition yet. So I think at this point it's just way too early to say it's going to come down to Bernie versus Biden. It's just too early.
Okay, yeah. I mean, my buddy has a little gambling app in Vegas, and you can bet on who's going to win the 2020 election or get the nomination. And right now the leader is Kamala Harris. She has the best numbers. We'll see. All right, guys, thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.
All right, the time now is 36 minutes after the hour. This Vietnam veteran's life saved on the battlefield by a medic after stepping on a landmine. Now, 50 years later, he's thanking him face to face. They join us live.
Wow. And get your daily fix of caffeine by subscription. A major fast food chain wants you to pay by the month. Stay tuned.
All right, good morning. Welcome back. The Department of Transportation is digging into the FAA's approval of the Boeing 737 MAX 8 planes after a deadly crash that killed 157 people last week.
Yeah, Tracy Carrasco from our sister network Fox Business has the latest on that probe. Hey, Tracy.
Good morning, guys. Yes, in addition to that, federal prosecutors are reportedly scrutinizing the development of these planes, the 737 MAX planes. The Wall Street Journal says a grand jury in Washington, D.C. has reportedly issued a subpoena to one person regarding the development of these planes, requesting more documents. That subpoena was sent just one day after the deadly accident last weekend in Ethiopia. I want to mention shares of Boeing. We are continuing to watch those very closely. Looks like they could be starting the second week in the red. Right now, shares of Boeing down more than 2% in the pre-market.
All right. And good news for people who love coffee. You can now buy a subscription.
Yes, I think this is a great idea. Burger King is offering a $5 a month subscription for coffee. So you can get one cup of coffee every single day, anytime at Burger King, a participating Burger King. So to sign up for this subscription service, you've just got to download Burger King's app. Go to the app. That's how you do it. But I think this would be a great thing for Burger King, because once you're in there, you buy the subscription, you're going to look at the breakfast menu. You're going to look at other things, buy things to go along with your coffee. It worked for McDonald's. We saw when they really turned around their breakfast menu and brought their earnings up. So
right, it gets you going to Burger King every day.
That is
too. And then you're getting breakfast.
Good idea.
I know, and that's about the cost of one cup of coffee at Starbucks. Yeah,
we're here
Tracy,
for it.
Thanks
I like
so
that.
much.
Thanks.
The co-founder of the environmentalist group Greenpeace claims that Google is scrubbing him from history. Patrick Moore tweeting two screenshots of a recent search of the group's founders. The top row, he says, is what the search engine now shows, and there's no mention of him. The bottom row, which he searched a few days ago, does include himself. More left Greenpeace after 15 years and has been critical of some of its stances. He also recently criticized Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez for her Green New Deal. Wow.
Actor Dean Cain is firing back at critics attacking him for defending free speech. Cain slammed online for suggesting that an Australian senator shouldn't have been assaulted over controversial comments. This video going viral after a protester egged the senator for his response to the New Zealand mosque attacks. Cain telling the Daily Caller that no one should be attacked for their political views, regardless of how abhorrent they are. He added, quote, "While I totally disagree with what I've seen of the senator's positions, is it illegal for him to hold them? Should he be physically attacked because of them?" Yeah.
Okay. Let's check in with Steve Doocy. Let's see what's coming up here in about 18 minutes. Hey, Steve.
I haven't been watching the news this weekend. I just saw the video of
You
the
missed
kid
the
with
egg?
the egg for the first time.
Yeah.
Holy cow.
It's a big one.
Right, just, yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
We're going to have Joy Jones join us to talk about if that happened to him, what would he do? Also, a lot of news. The president's been tweeting about General Motors. Hey, why'd you close down that plant in Ohio? So we're going to talk to all sorts of people about that, including the counselor to the president, Kellyanne Conway. She's going to be joining us from the White House. Harvard Law professor Alan Dershowitz and Charles Payne, host of Making Money on the Fox Business Network. So we have a busy 3 hours, Carly and Rob, that starts about 17 minutes from right now, right here on the channel. Everybody, trust for the morning news.
Can't wait for that to begin. Sounds like it's going to be a good show.
Thanks, Shimkus.
I'll see you in a couple minutes.
All right.
We'll be right back. 5 MS-13 gang members now accused of stabbing a 16-year-old 100 times before setting his body on fire and dumping him on the side of a road in Virginia. That boy and his family fleeing El Salvador after he was forced to join that gang there. So is this further proof of the situation at the border? The administration calls it an emergency. Here to weigh in is Border Patrol agent and Vice President of the National Border Patrol Council, Hector Garza. Thank you so much for coming on, Hector. You hear these stories time and time again. I still remember the story of the 2 girls on Long Island, and the brutality is just terrible. What do you make of this?
Well, this is just another example of the humanitarian and border security crisis that we're seeing along the border. Now, as Border Patrol agents, we've been sounding the alarm that this is a type of violence that an unsecured border creates. And that is why we need to make sure that we do have the funding and the resources to secure the border. We do know that MS-13 is a very dangerous international gang that is infiltrating our communities. And it's having very serious and negative effects in our American towns.
Yeah, just some numbers here. Let's show you in 2018, in the fiscal year, more than 2,000 MS-13 gang members were arrested in this country. I want to ask you, we're seeing such a steady stream of unaccompanied minors coming into this country. And I've always heard from law enforcement that they are so vulnerable to this gang because they come here and they're kind of lost when they arrive. They're teenagers and the gang recruits and takes them in. Does that sound right?
Yeah, and that is part of the humanitarian crisis where these unaccompanied children are being recruited and targeted by MS-13. They are recruited in their home countries, and they're also recruited here in the United States. And that's why we see these types of crimes that are very serious. Now, we have a long list of angel moms that have been affected by some of these illegal aliens that have committed very serious crimes. So we do need to get serious because, plain and simple, this is violence that is pouring across the border due to an unsecured border.
A lot of people point to, wanting to fix this problem in Central America. That's something that has been tried for a long time. Is that the way to go here, to try and fund their life there and try to improve the quality of life for these countries?
So I'm sure that there's a lot of things that can be done in these countries to better their situation out there. But first and foremost, we have to take care of America first. And that's what President Trump has been talking about. Take care of America first. Make sure that we're protected. Make sure that our Border Patrol agents have the resources along the border. Make sure that we have the proper physical barriers, infrastructure, and technology. And then, let's worry about Central America and what else we can do with these countries. But first, let's worry about the United States first. That needs to be priority number one.
Do you feel like many people on the left are ignoring your agency when you guys say, hey, we're telling you what we need? We need barriers of some sort. We need at least a few hundred miles of barriers to help us do our job. And you basically get ignored a lot of the time by many on the left.
Of course, that's been happening, and we've been meeting with members of Congress to let them know the stories on the border, to let them know the realities, to make sure that we don't let the fake news media dictate what's happening on the border. But unfortunately, our Border Patrol agents are being ignored. Our ICE agents are being ignored, and we have to make sure that our congressional leaders pay attention to the border security experts. Now, President Trump has done a great job in meeting with our Border Patrol agents, and he's one of the first presidents that's meeting with the rank and file agents to actually get the first-hand stories of what's happening in our situation on the border. And we just hope that those members of Congress do the same thing.
Yeah, even the New York Times now says that the border's at a breaking point, that this is not sustainable. It is a situation. All right, thank you, sir, very much. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Carly, over to you.
All right, thanks, Rob. Listen to this. He lost both of his legs and one arm after stepping on a landmine while serving his country in Vietnam. But Dennis Joyner never got to personally thank the medic who saved his life. Until now, 50 years later, Vietnam veterans Dennis Joyner and paramedic Dewey Doc Hayes finally reunited, and they join us now. Guys, it is so cool to see you together. What a full circle, incredible story. I want to first start off by thanking you for your service. And I want to first talk about the past, and then we'll talk about how you two reconnected. So, Dennis, I'm going to start with you. Can you tell us a little bit about that day in 1969 when you sustained your injuries? What happened?
Well, we were out on a mission, and I tripped a landmine. I don't remember the explosion when it happened that day. I don't remember flying up in the air. I remember falling back down. I never lost consciousness at all, so I was able to see the extent of my injuries. I, of course, immediately was screaming for help. My sergeant was the closest one to me, got to me first, and of course they contacted or hollered for the medic, and Doc came running, and between the two of them, they worked on me for just a little bit, and until they were able to get a chopper in and get the bleeding stopped. And basically, without Doc Hayes and Ed Reynolds that day, I wouldn't be here to have the opportunity.
Yeah. So, Doc, I'm sure you saw a lot of severely injured people during your time in Vietnam. Do you remember this? Do you remember helping him out?
Yes, very much so.
All right. What condition was he in when you saw him?
Well, he was awake and aware of of what happened to him, and I got up. First thing I did was give him morphine, and started. Ed Reynolds had put some tourniquets on him, and I checked him, and I started putting bandages around him to help stem the flow of blood.
Wow. I'm so glad that you did, and I'm sure, I know Dennis is as well, which is why he's never forgotten you. So to the question everybody is wondering, how the heck did you guys finally reconnect after 50 years? Tell us that story.
Well, what really happened, I tried for a number of years, and I had made contact with Ed and some of the others probably 10, 15 years after it happened, but we could never find Doc. We knew he was from Tennessee, and we kept trying. And then in 2014, and another individual that was there that day, I didn't know, Bill, Lena, or Doc didn't either, I don't believe. He in turn got in touch with me because he wanted to talk to me about what had happened that day also. And he had it in his mind that he felt that Doc and I should get together someday and reunite, and he wanted us to meet. And he just kept after it and kept after it, and finally here this past November, he ended up, he got a phone number, it was disconnected, and he sent a letter. And Doc, you can tell him about, when you got the letter that day.
Well, I got the letter. I didn't remember Bill, Lena, and I almost threw the letter away, but I decided to open it up and see what it was, and I read it and seen it, and I called him. He gave me Dennis's number, and I immediately called Dennis.
And you guys met for the first time. You guys met for the first time this past Friday, right?
Yes.
That's amazing. We have to go, but it is so cool to see you two together. You guys are both heroes, and we thank you so much for your service. Thank you so much for telling your story. We really appreciate it.
Well, thank you. It's an honor to serve.
Thank you.
Thank you. It was an honor.
All right, the time now is 54 minutes after the hour. Chaos in the cabin as an air rage reaches new heights. How bare feet sparked this bloody brawl. And cows are known to be big fans of Chick-fil-A, but this one willing to go to some great lengths to get there. We'll have that next.